David's older daughter is moving into our home permanently, and I refuse to subject my kids to her constant disrespect, so I filed for divorce. Now David is shocked. I will not sacrifice my own children to fix his child. Hey, Reddit, I don't usually post here. I just scroll, read other people's drama, and mind my business. But things at home went so sideways that I honestly didn't know where else to unload this. I've got two kids, a 15-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter, from my late husband. My now ex, David, has three kids. His oldest, a 16-year-old daughter, is from his ex-girlfriend. Then there's his 10-year-old son and his 7-year-old daughter from his late wife. David and I were together for 2 years before getting married, and we've been married for 4. When we first started dating, his oldest split time between David's home and her mom's, so she wasn't always around. That made things much smoother because the younger two got along fine with my kids. We did the usual blended family stuff, Friday pizza nights, the kids playing Minecraft, movie marathons in the living room. My son would teach the younger ones how to play games. My daughter liked reading to them. Everything was okay at first. Then small things started happening. I noticed a $20 bill missing from my glove box. Figured I must have spent it and forgotten. Then my daughter's new pack of scrunchies was half gone. She thought she'd left them at a friend's. Snacks would disappear faster than normal, but with 5 kids in the house, that wasn't exactly shocking. David's oldest, let's call her Kay, had a big personality. She wasn't shy, but she also had this way of turning every small request into a challenge. Ask her to rinse a plate, and she'd pause like she was deciding if it was worth her time, then do it like it was an insult. She'd mock the younger ones when they got upset, then switch to being sweet if David walked in. My kids noticed, but nobody wanted to start drama. Relatives started pointing things out too. David's aunt said a perfume bottle went missing after Kay visited. Another relative said a bracelet wasn't where she'd left it. Everyone brushed it off with, "I must have misplaced it." Around the same time, Kay's mom would tell David about all these new things Kay had bought because she was such a good saver. That didn't match what we saw. Kay would spend any money she got right away unless someone stopped her. Over time, she got bolder. If I said no phones at the table, she'd keep hers face down by her plate and say, "It's on silent." She'd make digs at my kids, call my son a nerd for caring about school, say my daughter's hobbies were babyish. She started taking things right before heading back to her mom's. One time it was parts from my son's Nintendo Switch. Kay had mentioned that her Switch at her mom's house had broken parts, so that was suspicious. We started hiding stuff before visits. My daughter kept her sketchbook in my dresser drawer. My son took his games to a friend's house. Even the little ones would ask if they could hide their piggy banks. You could feel the tension the day before Kay arrived. I tried to handle it fairly. I made house rules. Phones charged in the kitchen by 9:30. No taking snacks without asking. Bedrooms are private spaces. I told all the kids at the same time. The younger ones followed the rules. My kids followed the rules. Kay ignored them. I even offered to pay her for jobs like washing the car or organizing the garage so she could earn spending money. She did a couple half-heartedly, then told David I was using her. About a year into our marriage, Kay's mom got a job out of state and petitioned the court to take her with her. David fought it, but Kay said she wanted to go, and the judge allowed it. The court ordered her mom to pay for her visits to us. That's when things escalated. Every visit, stuff went missing. My kids locked their doors or hid things in their pillowcases. Sometimes even David's younger two noticed their stuff was gone. I pointed it out to David, but he didn't want to believe it. He'd say, "Maybe someone misplaced something, or maybe the little ones took it." But it was the same pattern every time. Visit starts, things disappear, visit ends, no proof. By the time the conversation came up about Kay moving in full-time, my kids already wanted nothing to do with her. I'd been watching the same problems get worse for years, and I knew where it was heading. The topic came up during one of Kay's summer visits. We'd been in the same cycle for years. She'd come, tension rose, stuff went missing, she'd leave, and things relaxed until the next visit. My son would basically disappear into his room when she was around. My daughter stayed in the kitchen or outside to avoid her. They didn't complain much unless something specific happened, but I could tell they were counting down the days until she left. That afternoon, Kay was in the living room while I was outside mowing the lawn. When I came in, David was smiling like he had big news. He told me Kay wanted to live with us permanently. Her mom was considering a new job that would keep her traveling a lot, and Kay said she'd rather be with us than stuck without her mom at home. David's reaction was instant. He said yes before I even processed it. He was already talking about rearranging bedrooms to make her space. Kay looked happy. I just stood there thinking about the last few years and how my kids were going to take it. I told David we needed to slow down and actually think about this. My exact words were, "We can't just bring her in full time without figuring out how to handle the issues we've had." He rolled his eyes and said, "It'll be better when she's here full time because she won't feel like a visitor." I'd heard enough from his own relatives to know it wasn't going to be that simple. People in his family had said things like, "She's been like that since she was 7. I don't know how you'd fix it now." This wasn't just a phase, it was who she was, and moving her in full time wasn't going to magically change her. I reminded David that my priority had to be my kids. They'd already had their belongings stolen, been insulted in their own home, and had been walking on eggshells during visits. I wasn't about to force them to live like that every single day. He didn't like hearing that. He told me I had a duty to all 5 kids, not just my 2. The thing is, I do care about his younger 2. I've been in their lives for years, doing school drop-offs, helping with homework, taking them to soccer and dance, but they aren't in danger of losing their belongings or being mocked every time Kay's around. My kids are. And David's logic was basically stay, fix it, and parent her the same as the others. That might sound reasonable to someone who hasn't lived it, but you can't fix someone who doesn't think they're wrong and has no interest in changing. He asked me to at least talk to my kids about it. I told him we already knew how they felt, but fine, I'd ask. Later that night, I brought it up. My son immediately said he didn't want her living with us, and he brought up the Nintendo Switch incident again. My daughter said, flat out, that she didn't feel safe having her things around Kay. She didn't yell or cry. She just said no. That was all the confirmation I needed. When I told David, he said we should work through it because his younger 2 couldn't lose me. I told him I wasn't disappearing from their lives, but I wasn't going to sacrifice my kids' comfort and security to make this happen. I even told him that if Kay moved in, I'd move out with my kids. I wasn't saying it to be dramatic, it was just reality. That's when the guilt trip started. He accused me of putting my kids over his. I told him I was putting my kids over someone who repeatedly disrespected them. That's not the same thing. He said I was running away instead of fixing the problem. I told him we'd been dealing with this for years, and nothing had changed. There wasn't a fix coming. When Kay officially told her mom she wanted to live with us, David treated my concerns like negative energy. He started buying things for her new room before we'd even agreed on anything, like if he moved fast enough, I'd just go along with it. If anything, that made my decision easier. I started quietly looking for a place for me and my kids. Once I found somewhere decent and had the lease ready, I told him we were moving out. David said I was destroying the family and making his younger 2 lose another parental figure. I told him again I'd stay in their lives if he'd let me, but we weren't going to live with Kay full time. We moved out about 2 weeks later. My kids were relieved. My son unpacked his stuff in his new room and said, "Finally, I can leave my headphones on my desk." My daughter set up her art supplies without worrying about them disappearing. It wasn't a big place, but it was ours, and there was no countdown to when someone would walk in and mess with their things. After we moved, David tried to get me to reconsider. He called, texted, even showed up once. He kept saying, "We never really tried to work something out." I told him there was nothing to work out. I'd been clear for years about what I wouldn't put my kids through. He brought up the younger 2 again, saying they were suffering because both of their moms or dads had left them. I told him that was unfair. Their situation wasn't my fault. Meanwhile, Kay moved in with him full time. From what I've heard, the same things are still happening. Relatives have quietly mentioned things going missing. I'm not surprised. You can't ignore a problem for years and expect it to magically disappear. The younger 2 still see me sometimes. I pick them up, we do stuff together, I go to their games. My kids don't mind because it's not in our home, so there's no stress. It works fine like this. I filed for divorce about 2 weeks after moving out. There was no second guessing. No, maybe if we just try. I'd already tried for years. My lawyer didn't even blink. He said, "If you've moved out with your kids and he's pushing to bring someone into the home who's a threat to them, you're already doing the right thing." The moment David got the papers, I started getting long texts and emails. Some angry. "I can't believe you're doing this without even trying to fix it." Some guilt-trippy. "The little ones are crying every night and asking why you left." Not once did he acknowledge Kay's behavior. Not once did he admit there was a real problem. It was all about how I was breaking up the family and how I should love all the kids equally. David's family started weighing in. His sister called and said, "You can't just pick up and leave because of a teenager's attitude." I told her it wasn't about attitude. It was about years of stealing, disrespect, and making my kids feel unsafe in their own home. Her response? "That's just what teens do." At that point, I realized they weren't going to get it. His mother took it further. She told me outright that I was selfish for prioritizing my kids over the whole family unit. I told her, "No, I'm prioritizing my kids over one person who's made life miserable for them." That ended the conversation. The one bright spot was my own family. My parents and my brother were 100% behind me. My dad even said, "If you'd stayed, we'd have had to have a talk about what you were letting those kids go through." He doesn't sugarcoat. My mom kept reminding me that my kids had already lost their father. They didn't need more chaos. The younger two stepkids were the toughest part of this whole thing. They didn't do anything wrong. I'd been part of their lives since they were little, and I knew they'd take the separation hard. When I picked them up after we moved, they asked why we couldn't all just live together again. I told them the truth without going into every detail, that their sister and my kids didn't get along, and that it was better for everyone to live separately. They didn't like it, but they understood enough. David hated that I was still seeing them. He acted like if I was going to divorce him, I should cut ties completely so they could adjust. I told him flat out that wasn't happening unless they told me they didn't want to see me. And guess what? They kept wanting to see me. Meanwhile, my kids were thriving in our new place. It's not big, but they have their own rooms. My son started leaving his laptop out without worrying it would disappear. My daughter started painting again, leaving her canvases out instead of locking them away. Small things, but they meant the world to us. Kay, on the other hand, was apparently settling right into her new full-time situation with David. Within the first month, one of David's cousins told me his younger two had already started losing toys and clothes. The cousin said, "Don't be surprised if she calls you complaining about it." I wasn't. About 6 weeks into the divorce process, David tried another tactic. He asked me to come over to talk about the kids' sake. I agreed, thinking maybe we could set boundaries for visits or figure out a smoother schedule for the younger two. Instead, he sat me down and said, "I think we should pause the divorce, give it 6 months, and see if you can learn to live with Kay." I told him no, point blank. He went into a speech about how real love is staying and working through challenges, how the younger two needed stability, and how my kids could learn tolerance. I told him my kids didn't need to learn tolerance for theft and disrespect in their own home. That's not a life skill. That's enabling bad behavior. He didn't like that word, enabling, but that's exactly what he'd been doing for years. After that, he tried pulling the "you're abandoning them like their dads did" card again. I cut it short. "No, I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm protecting my kids. You had years to address this and chose not to. That's on you." From then on, most of our contact was through lawyers. That actually made things calmer. No more random midnight calls or guilt trips. We stuck to schedules for the younger two, and I focused on my kids and my job. Word got around in our town. People talk. I could tell when someone had heard David's version because they'd give me that polite smile and ask, "How are you holding up?" I'd just say, "We're doing fine," and leave it at that. The people who mattered already knew the truth. One thing I noticed, my kids were more relaxed in general. My son started inviting friends over instead of always going to theirs. My daughter started baking again. The house just felt lighter. No one was double-checking their backpack to make sure stuff was still inside. No one was avoiding the living room. I don't regret moving out for a second. If anything, I wish I'd done it sooner. Once it sank in for David that I wasn't coming back, he changed his strategy. At first, it was calls and texts about working it out and doing it for the kids. Then it turned into more subtle stuff, getting mutual friends to plant the idea that I'd overreacted. It started with a guy from my old volunteer group. His wife is friends with David, so I wasn't surprised. One afternoon he said, "Hey, I heard things got rough at home. You sure you don't want to just give it another try? Kids grow out of this stuff." I just looked at him and said, "This isn't about growing out of it. It's about years of stealing and disrespect. My kids feel safe now. That's not something I gamble with." He didn't push after that, but others did. A neighbor stopped me while I was unloading groceries and said she missed seeing all the kids riding bikes together. I didn't bother explaining that half the time. My kids wouldn't even go outside if Kay was visiting because they didn't want to deal with her attitude or her grabbing their stuff. Then one of David's cousins cornered me at the hardware store. He said, "She's saying you walked out without warning." I told him I'd been warning her for years. She just didn't listen. He nodded, but I could tell he'd still report back whatever version she wanted to hear. Meanwhile, my lawyer kept the divorce moving. David wasn't contesting custody of my kids. They're mine, 100%. But he kept trying to push for more family integration. By that, he meant schedules that had my kids and his younger two together as much as possible. I didn't object to them spending time together, but he also wanted Kay included in those visits. I flat out refused. That became a sticking point. I told my lawyer, I'm not doing joint events with Kay there. My kids don't want it, and I'm not going to force it. He said as long as my kids' wishes were clear and documented, we could hold our ground. And we did. Around this time, his younger two started talking more when they were at my place. They never trashed their sister outright, but they'd mention things like how their tablet went missing for a week before it magically showed up in Kay's room, or how they had to hide snacks because she'd take them and deny it. It was the same pattern I'd seen for years. I never pressed them, but it was obvious they were dealing with the same problems now. About 3 months after we moved out, David called me out of the blue. Since the lawyer route wasn't getting him what he wanted, he tried being casual. He asked how the kids were, how work was going, and then said, they really miss you here. The younger two keep asking when you're coming over. I told them you're just being stubborn. I kept my voice calm and said, I'm not being stubborn. I'm respecting boundaries. You know why I left. He tried to twist it. You left because you didn't want to put in the work. Families take work. I told him, I've been putting in the work for years. You've been ignoring the problem for years. That's the difference. He didn't like that. Next thing I knew, he was telling me I'd ruined our chance at being a blended family. I didn't even bother answering. My kids and I had our own lives now. My son had joined the basketball team. My daughter was entering art competitions. Our weekends were full of park trips, friends over, and not once having to check if valuables were locked away. I could leave my wallet on the counter and know it'd still be there. But I kept hearing about trouble at David's house. A friend of mine who works at the school told me Kay had been caught taking cash from another student's backpack. They didn't make it a huge incident, just school discipline, but the fact that it was happening there too wasn't surprising. I didn't even bother telling David because I knew he'd either deny it or claim the school was overreacting. The last real push he made to get me back was about 4 months in. He asked me to meet him at a coffee shop to discuss the kids' holidays. I went, thinking it was about scheduling Christmas. Nope. It was him with a photo album, showing me pictures of all of us together over the years, saying we owed it to the kids to fight for this. I let him finish, then said, You're showing me pictures from years when my kids were hiding their things before visits, times when they told me they didn't feel safe in their own home. I'm not going back to that. He accused me of rewriting history. I told him, No, I'm remembering it accurately. You just don't want to admit it. He stormed out, and I paid for my own coffee. After that, he finally stopped trying to convince me. I think reality hit when he saw the divorce wasn't stalling, and that the younger two were still seeing me regularly without him being able to use it as leverage. By the time spring rolled around, my kids and I had a rhythm. School activities, dinners together, weekends at the park, or working on projects at home. I fixed up old bikes for them, built a small garden in the backyard, and we got a dog. My son named him Max. The younger two would visit and play with Max too. Even though it wasn't the same as before, we still had fun. I made sure they knew they were welcome at our place anytime. And now I could actually keep that promise without worrying about someone making life miserable for my kids. Once the noise from David's side died down, life got quiet. No constant arguing, no locking up valuables, no tense dinners where someone was glaring across the table, just peace. By the new year, I'd stopped expecting any major drama from David. He wasn't texting me to come home anymore. He seemed to have accepted I wasn't budging. Or so I thought. Turns out he'd just shifted tactics. One Monday morning, my lawyer emailed me. David's attorney had filed a proposal to alter our custody arrangement. Not over my kids, but over his two youngest. He wanted me to have joint step-parent responsibilities for them on my custody weekends, which meant I'd have to take his younger two at the same time as my kids. And surprise, surprise, he wasn't excluding Kay from those visits. I called my lawyer right away. No way, that's not happening. He laughed and said, Don't worry, we're shutting it down. He can't force that kind of arrangement, especially after you've made it clear why you left. Still, it told me exactly where David's head was, trying to backdoor Kay into my kids' lives. A week later, I ran into one of David's neighbors while I was getting gas. He's always been friendly, but I could tell he was hesitant. Hey, I don't want to get in the middle, he said, but Has Kay always been like that? I asked what he meant. He said, I've had stuff go missing from my garage. Nothing huge, just tools, random things. Then I saw her with one of my old screwdrivers when she was helping wash their car. I told him it didn't surprise me. He just shook his head and said, Your kids are better off where they are. Word was starting to spread on its own. I didn't have to say a thing. By February, the younger two started talking more about what was happening at David's house. I never pried, but kids talk when they feel safe. They told me Kay had borrowed their stuff so often that they started hiding it under their beds, and even then, she'd dig around. One of them said they saw her take cash from their dad's wallet and deny it when confronted. I just listened and told them, You know you're always safe here. Not long after, David called me again. But this time, it wasn't to argue or guilt trip. It was to ask for help. He said Kay had been caught shoplifting at the mall with a couple of friends. Security had called him to come pick her up, and now he was trying to figure out how to get her back on track. I kept my voice neutral and said, You've had years to get her on track. I told you what would happen if you kept ignoring it. He got defensive instantly. Don't act like you know everything. She's my daughter. I'll handle it. I said, Exactly. She's your daughter. Handle it. It might sound cold, but by then, I'd had every version of that conversation. Nothing I said was going to change his approach. The divorce was moving forward, but he was still dragging his feet on some paperwork. My lawyer said it wasn't enough to cause a major delay, but it was obvious David was stalling, probably because the longer the process took, the more chances he'd have to sneak in some request to get me more involved with his kids again. Around March, he finally seemed to drop the push to force Kay into my kids' lives. But then the tone shifted. Instead of calling me stubborn, he started saying things like, You're abandoning the younger two. They don't deserve to lose you because of Kay. I'd always been clear with the younger ones. They could see me anytime, and nothing between David and me changed that. But I wasn't going to give him away to use them as a bridge back into my home life. When they visited, we had a great time. Park trips, movie nights, playing with Max. But there was a line, and I wasn't crossing it. One weekend, I overheard the youngest telling my daughter that Kay had gone through her backpack and taken markers she got for her birthday. She told me she just needed them, but she's not giving them back, the little one said. My daughter just replied, That's exactly why Mom won't let her here. No drama, no yelling, just matter-of-fact truth from a 13-year-old. By April, my lawyer had most of the case wrapped. We were just waiting on one final hearing, and he told me it was basically a formality. That's when David made one last attempt to talk face-to-face. He showed up at my place unannounced. My son answered the door and called for me. David was standing there, holding a couple of photo albums and a box of random stuff from our old house. Souvenirs from trips, birthday cards, that kind of thing. He said he thought I'd want to remember what we had. I didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway and said, I remember it fine. I also remember what ended it. This isn't going to change anything. He tried to pivot. You're really going to throw away years because of one person's mistakes? I said, one person's mistakes that happened over and over for years while you look the other way? Yes. He left the box on the porch and walked off. Later, my daughter went through it and said, You can tell he picked stuff to make you feel bad. I told her to keep anything she liked and put the rest in storage. Not long after, I started hearing from people in David's circle. A man from his church messaged me on Facebook and said he finally understood why I left. Apparently, Kay had been caught taking money from a donation jar during an event. Another person told me she'd been banned from a neighbor's house because she took earbuds from one of their kids and lied about it. It wasn't about keeping score, but it confirmed what I already knew. My decision had been the right one. If my kids were still living there, they'd be in the middle of all that mess. By summer, the divorce was finalized. David didn't get the joint events or family integration he wanted. My custody of my kids stayed exactly the same. I had open visitation with the younger two when they wanted it, but nothing was forced. Kay was completely out of our lives, just like I'd said from the start. Once the legal part was over, the noise almost completely stopped. No more guilt trips, no surprise visits, just two separate households running their own way. From what I heard, David was still trying to manage things with Kay, but the same problems were still there. The difference now was there was no one else to absorb the fallout. Meanwhile, my kids were happy, safe, and able to enjoy their home without constantly looking over their shoulders. I honestly thought that was the end of it. But David had one more card to play, and it crossed a line I never thought he'd cross. It was a Friday night in late fall. My kids had just come back from their weekly dinner with his younger two. They'd met at a pizza place near his house because I didn't want Kay anywhere in the picture. Everything seemed normal when they walked in, but an hour later, both of them were doubled over in the bathroom. At first, I thought it was food poisoning, but it escalated fast. Vomiting, dizziness, my son couldn't stand without nearly passing out. I rushed them to urgent care. The doctor asked if they'd eaten anything unusual. I told him it was just pizza and soda from a chain place. They ran tests and found something in their systems that wasn't food-related. Traces of an over-the-counter sleep aid, way more than a safe dose, enough to make an adult drowsy for hours. For kids, it could have been dangerous. The doctor asked if I wanted to file a report. I didn't even hesitate. I called the police from the waiting room. The first thing they did was go to the pizza place to check security footage. Turns out David had shown up to say hi while they were eating with the younger two. He brought them drinks from the counter instead of letting them refill their own. They drank them. He left. The cops couldn't say why he'd do it, but I didn't need a motive. I believe he wanted to make them sleepy so he could take them to his house for the night without me knowing, to try and get them comfortable with Kay again. It was twisted and reckless. That night, I emailed my lawyer one line. File for an emergency protective order first thing Monday. By Tuesday, the court had approved it. The restraining order covered me and my kids, barred David from contacting us directly or indirectly, and blocked him from coming within 200 yards of our home, schools, or workplaces. It also limited his access to the younger two's events if my kids were there. The order didn't stop me from seeing his younger two. It just meant their dad couldn't be present during visits. We kept our time with them separate from anything involving him or Kay. The fallout for David was immediate. People he'd known for years stopped talking to him. The younger two's school put him on a monitored parent list, meaning any visits had to be approved and supervised. Word spread quickly, and it wasn't the kind of rumor you could explain away. Kay's behavior didn't magically improve either. If anything, it got worse without anyone to blame but her dad. Neighbors started keeping their kids away, and she lost 2 babysitting jobs because parents didn't trust her. By winter, David's life was a mess, and he'd done it to himself. One afternoon, out of nowhere, I got an email from David. The subject line just said, "I'm sorry." The body was a long wall of text. He admitted to everything. He blamed stress, said he never meant to hurt the kids, claimed he was ready to start fresh as a better person. He asked if we could meet somewhere to talk it out. I didn't write a speech, I didn't explain myself, I typed one word. No. Then I closed the email, blocked his address, and went back to my day. My kids were in the living room, laughing over a card game. Max was asleep on the rug. There was no tension in the air, no one guarding their belongings, no undercurrent of dread about the next visit. Life was calm. The younger two still came over sometimes. We went to the park, baked cookies, watched movies. They understood that their sister wasn't welcome here, and they didn't push it. David wasn't part of those visits, and he never would be again. I'd protected my kids, drawn a line, and enforced it. For years, people had told me to try harder, work through it, blend the family. But blending doesn't work when one ingredient poisons the whole mix. And the truth was, I didn't just save my kids from Kay, I saved them from the slow erosion of their trust, peace, and security. David had his chance to fix it, over and over again. He chose not to. Now, the consequences were his alone. And for the first time in years, I could say it and mean it. We're safe. We're home. And we're never going back.